Our planet's history is a book with most of its pages missing. 4.5 billion years of existence are recorded in scattered, fragmented layers of rock and ice. A story so vast and so incomplete that we can only guess at what the lost chapters contain. We have pieced together the age of dinosaurs, the great oxygenation event, and the 5 mass extinctions that have reset the course of evolution. The greatest of these, the Permian extinction, killed over 90% of all life on Earth with a speed and ferocity that still baffles science. We, as a species, confidently place ourselves at the very end of this long, violent story, the first and only technological intelligence to ever arise. But this is an assumption, an article of faith, based on an incomplete record, given the immense, almost unimaginable gulfs of deep time. Can we be so sure? What if advanced industrial civilizations rose and fell millions, or even hundreds of millions of years, before the first human ancestor ever walked the earth, leaving behind only the faintest, most subtle traces in the rock and ice? Before we journey further into this deep and unsettling mystery, we invite you to become a part of our exploration. Feel free to leave a comment with what location you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in as our exploration truly begins. The formal name for this thought experiment, this search for a lost industrial civilization in the deep past, is the Silurian hypothesis. Coined by NASA climate scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank, the name is a nod to a classic episode of Doctor Who, but the science behind it is profoundly serious. The hypothesis confronts a simple, powerful problem. The geological record of Earth is exceptionally poor at preserving the direct evidence of a civilization. Our modern industrial world, with its sprawling cities of concrete and steel, its global network of roads, and its mountains of plastic waste, feels permanent. But this is an illusion. The surface of our planet is a relentless recycling plant. The forces of erosion, sedimentation, and plate tectonics would grind our entire civilization to dust and bury its remains under miles of new rock in just a few million years, a mere blink of an eye, in geological terms. If a civilization had existed 60 million years ago, in the age of mammals, or 100 million years ago in the age of dinosaurs, there would be no fossilized cities for us to find, no ruins of ancient power plants, no buried superhighways. The chances of a single recognizable technological artifact surviving for that long are statistically almost zero. The search for a lost civilization on Earth cannot be a search for objects. It must be a search for traces. It must be a hunt for the large-scale, planetary footprint, the techno-signature that a global, energy-intensive civilization would inevitably leave behind. A fingerprint burned into the geological strata of the planet itself. We would not find their buildings, but we might find the chemical echo of their pollution. We would not find their machines, but we might find the isotopic anomalies from their power sources. We are not looking for a needle in a haystack. We are looking for the chemical signature of the entire haystack having been burned down. The most obvious techno-signature an industrial civilization would leave behind is in the planet's carbon cycle. Our own modern civilization is powered by burning fossil fuels, the buried remains of ancient life. This process releases vast quantities of old carbon into the atmosphere. This fossil carbon has a unique isotopic signature. It is depleted in the rare isotope carbon-13. A sudden massive release of this carbon-13 depleted carbon into the atmosphere would be a clear, unambiguous, and long-lasting sign of an industrial civilization at work. When geologists look back through the rock record, they can see many ancient rapid global warming events called hyperthermals. The most famous of these the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PTM, occurred about 56 million years ago. During this event, a colossal amount of carbon was released into the atmosphere in a geological instant, causing global temperatures to spike and ocean chemistry to change dramatically. The source of this carbon spike is a profound mystery, with the leading natural explanation being the massive burning of peat, or the melting of frozen methane. But the isotopic signature of this ancient carbon, and the speed at which it was released, is hauntingly similar to the signature of our own modern anthropogenic global warming. The search for a lost civilization on Earth is therefore not a search for ancient ruins, but for these ghosts in the rock. It is a hunt for faint chemical echoes, for strange isotopic anomalies, and for the sudden violent shifts in the planetary climate that a global industrial society might have unleashed upon itself. As we dig deeper into the geological record, we find that our planet's history is filled with these strange, violent, and unexplained events. The clues have been there all along, waiting for us to ask the right, terrifying question. Are we looking at a series of natural, if mysterious, climate fluctuations? Or are we looking at the fossilized signatures of a series of forgotten, industrial apocalypses? The next clue in this unsettling investigation takes us from the layers of sediment that record our climate's past and into the heart of the atom itself, to a 2 billion-year-old uranium deposit in the heart of Africa, where nature, or perhaps something else entirely, appears to have built a series of perfectly functioning nuclear reactors. The strange and persistent carbon signatures in the deep geological record are a tantalizing but ultimately ambiguous clue, a potential fossilized breath of an ancient and unknown industry. The data is suggestive, but it is not definitive. It is a whisper of a possibility. But what if there is evidence of something far more advanced, far more specific, and far more difficult to explain away as a natural coincidence? What if we have found the remnants not just of a civilization that burned fossil fuels, but one that had mastered the fundamental forces of the atom itself? Our journey now takes us from the layered sediments that record our planet's climate history and into the heart of the African continent, to a 2 billion-year-old uranium deposit in the nation of Gabon. It is here, buried deep underground, that nature, or perhaps something else entirely, appears to have built a series of perfectly designed, self-regulating, and fully functional nuclear reactors. The story begins in 1972, not in a remote jungle, but in a sterile, high-tech French nuclear fuel processing plant. A technician was conducting a routine analysis of a batch of uranium ore that had been mined from the Oklo region of Gabon. The analysis involved a precise measurement of the different isotopes of uranium, specifically the ratio of the fissile or chain-reacting isotope uranium-235 to its more stable cousin uranium-238. For all of known physics, this ratio is a universal constant. On the Earth, on the Moon, in every meteorite ever found, the natural abundance of uranium-235 is precisely 0.720%, but the sample from Oklo was different. It was significantly depleted in uranium-235. The initial reaction in the lab was not one of scientific curiosity, but of immediate and profound alarm. The only known way for uranium to become depleted in its fissile isotope is for it to have already been used in a nuclear reactor. The immediate fear was that someone, somewhere, had secretly built an illicit nuclear facility, processed the uranium, and then somehow returned the spent fuel to the mine. An urgent investigation was launched, but it would lead not to a modern conspiracy, but to an ancient and almost unbelievable mystery. The uranium from Oklo had not been through a modern reactor. It had been through a reactor that had operated and then shut itself down 2 billion years ago. The mainstream scientific explanation that was eventually formulated for this incredible anomaly is a story of a miracle of natural engineering, a one in a trillion series of perfect and fortunate coincidences. The theory posits that 2 billion years ago, the natural conditions in this specific part of the Earth's crust just happened to be perfect for a natural, self-sustaining nuclear fission reaction to begin. Firstly, the natural abundance of uranium-235 was much higher back then, because U-235 decays much faster than U-238. 2 billion years ago, the natural concentration in uranium ore was approximately 3.7%, a level that is, coincidentally, the exact enrichment level required to sustain a chain reaction in a modern, light water nuclear reactor. Secondly, for a chain reaction to work, the fast neutrons released by fission must be slowed down by a moderator. At Oklo, it is believed that groundwater repeatedly seeped into the rich uranium deposit, and this water acted as the perfect neutron moderator. And thirdly, the deposit had to be remarkably free of other elements, like boron or lithium, which are neutron poisons that absorb neutrons and would have instantly stopped any chain reaction from beginning. The natural explanation, therefore, is that all of these improbable conditions came together by sheer chance in at least 17 different locations within the same geological deposit, creating a series of natural, self-sustaining nuclear reactors. But as scientists studied the Oklo sites in more detail, a series of even more unsettling and difficult to explain features began to emerge, details that strained the limits of the natural coincidence explanation. The reactors did not just go critical and melt down. The evidence shows that they operated in a gentle, stable, and perfectly self-regulating pulse for a period of several 100,000 years. The proposed mechanism for this is that the heat from the fission reaction would boil the groundwater moderator, turning it to steam. The steam, being less dense, was a less effective moderator, which would cause the nuclear reaction to slow down and cool off. As it cooled, the steam would condense back into liquid water, which would then restart the chain reaction. This is a sophisticated natural negative feedback loop, a system that acted like a perfect automatic set of control rods. Furthermore, the dangerous, highly radioactive fission byproducts, the nuclear waste from these 2 billion-year-old reactors, have remained perfectly contained. An analysis of the surrounding geology shows that toxic elements like cesium and technetium have not migrated more than a few millimeters from the spot where they were created 2 billion years ago. The specific clay structure of the surrounding rock acted as a perfect, long-term geological repository for the nuclear waste. This is a level of flawless, permanent nuclear waste containment that our own modern, multi-billion-dollar efforts to build geological repositories like Yucca Mountain are struggling to guarantee for even 10,000 years, let alone 2 billion. The question then becomes one of probability. Is it more plausible that a series of 17 perfect, self-regulating, and perfectly self-containing nuclear reactors formed by sheer, repeated coincidence? Or is it more plausible that we are looking at something that was deliberately and brilliantly designed? To place this mystery in its proper context, we must consider what the Earth was like 2 billion years ago, when these reactors were active. This was the era of the Great Oxidation Event, a period of catastrophic global environmental change. The rise of photosynthetic cyanobacteria was flooding the atmosphere with a new, and for most of the planet's existing life, a deadly, corrosive, and toxic poison: oxygen. This was the first, and perhaps the greatest mass extinction event in our planet's history. A global apocalypse for the anaerobic life that had dominated the world for the previous 2 billion years. It was a time of immense environmental stress and planetary transformation. It is in this context that the most speculative and most chilling hypothesis for the Oklo reactors was born. Could an ancient, intelligent, but perhaps non-human, anaerobic civilization have been responsible, facing a planetary extinction event from a newly poisoned atmosphere, a world that was becoming fundamentally hostile to their own biology? Could they have turned to the clean, long-lasting power of the atom to create stable, long-term, underground or underwater refuges, sealed environments where they could be shielded from the toxic surface and survive for a few more generations? Of course, the immediate and most powerful counterargument to this staggering idea is the complete lack of any other evidence. If there was a civilization advanced enough to build a series of nuclear reactors, where are their cities? Where are their tools? Where are their fossils? This is where the almost unimaginable scale of deep time re-enters the story. 2 billion years is a gulf of time so vast that it is almost a meaningless number. It is not just millions of years, it is 2,000 million years. Over this time scale, the relentless engine of plate tectonics has completely and totally recycled the Earth's surface, not just once, but multiple times over. Any continent on which such a civilization might have lived has since been subducted into the Earth's molten mantle, its rocks, its cities, its tools, and its fossils melted down into magma and erased forever from the historical record. The absence of other evidence is not, in this case, evidence of absence. It is the expected and inevitable outcome of 2 billion years of relentless geological recycling. The only thing that could plausibly survive for 2 billion years is not a building or a fossil, but a techno-signature written in the permanent and unchanging language of atoms. The specific, anomalous, and unmistakable isotopic ratios of nuclear waste products, which are a direct and irrefutable record of a controlled fission reaction. The 2 billion-year-old reactors at Oklo leave us with a profound and deeply unsettling choice. We are forced to believe in either a series of miracles of natural coincidence that just so happen to perfectly mimic the hallmarks of advanced and responsible nuclear engineering, or we must believe in a lost, ancient, and deeply mysterious intelligence from a time before complex multicellular life was even thought to exist on this planet. The evidence is frozen in the ancient rock of Gabon, a quiet, radioactive whisper of atomic power from the very dawn of life on Earth. But what if the evidence for a lost world is not so ancient, and not so ambiguous? What if a sophisticated civilization rose and fell, much more recently, in a time period that we thought we understood completely? The search for our predecessors now takes a great leap forward in time, from the age of microbes to the age of the dinosaurs, and to the provocative and deeply compelling hypothesis that the great reptiles were not just mindless beasts, but were perhaps the first true technological masters of this planet. The 2 billion-year-old nuclear reactors at Oklo leave us suspended in a state of profound and unsettling ambiguity. We are forced to choose between a series of miracles of natural coincidence that perfectly mimic the hallmarks of advanced nuclear engineering, or the existence of a lost, ancient, and deeply mysterious intelligence from a time before complex, multicellular life was even thought to exist on this planet. The evidence is frozen in the ancient rock of Gabon, a quiet, radioactive whisper from the very dawn of life. But what if the evidence for a lost world is not so ancient and not so ambiguous? What if a sophisticated industrial civilization rose and fell much more recently, in a time period that we thought we understood completely? A period ruled not by microbes, but by giants. The search for our predecessors now takes a great and shocking leap forward in time, from the age of simple cells to the age of the dinosaurs, and to the provocative and deeply compelling hypothesis that the great reptiles were not just mindless beasts, but were perhaps the first true technological masters of this planet. For most of our history, we have viewed the dinosaurs through a lens of primitive monstrosity. We have seen them as slow-witted, cold-blooded, and ultimately doomed beasts. A failed evolutionary experiment that was mercifully wiped from the slate to make way for the rise of mammals and eventually ourselves. But this is a deeply outdated and profoundly arrogant view. Modern paleontology has painted a new, far more complex and dynamic picture of the Mesozoic era. The dinosaurs were one of the most successful and dominant forms of life this planet has ever produced. Their reign lasted for over 160 million years, a span of time so immense it makes our own species' brief 200,000-year history look like a fleeting, momentary flicker. This vast, almost unimaginable ocean of time is more than sufficient for the processes of evolution to produce not just intelligence, but perhaps even technological civilization, not just once, but potentially multiple times over. This is the core of the Silurian hypothesis, a serious thought experiment proposed by credible scientists to make us question our deepest assumptions about our own uniqueness. It asks us to consider the possibility that if we were to look for the geological fingerprint of an industrial civilization, we might find it buried not in the recent rock of the human era, but in the ancient deep strata of a lost Saurian world. The case for the plausibility of a dinosaur civilization is built not on fantasy, but on a growing body of fossil evidence that points towards a high degree of intelligence and complex social behavior among certain species. We must abandon the image of the lumbering brontosaurus and instead consider the more advanced theropods, the two-legged, predatory dinosaurs from which modern birds evolved. Species like Troodon possessed a brain-to-body mass ratio, or encephalization quotient, that was comparable to that of modern birds and intelligent mammals. Their brains had large optic lobes, suggesting sophisticated vision, and a well-developed cerebrum, indicating a capacity for complex thought and problem-solving. The fossil record is also filled with evidence of highly complex social structures. We have found fossilized trackways that show herds of herbivores moving in coordinated, structured formations, with the young protected in the center. We have found evidence of pack hunting among raptor species, a strategy that requires communication, planning, and a high degree of social intelligence. We have even found dinosaurs that appeared to care for their young in communal nesting grounds. These were not mindless monsters. These were complex, intelligent, and socially sophisticated animals that had every evolutionary tool necessary to take the next great leap towards technological capability. If such a civilization of intelligent reptiles did exist, perhaps 60 or 70 million years ago, how would we ever find it? As we have established, the Earth is a relentless recycling plant. Over a timescale of tens of millions of years, every city of concrete and steel, every machine, every road would be ground to dust, subducted into the mantle, and erased forever. We must instead search for the indirect planetary scale fingerprint, the techno-signature that a global industrial civilization would have left behind. A Saurian industrial revolution, for instance, would have likely been powered by the same energy source we turn to, fossil fuels. The immense coal and oil deposits laid down during the much more ancient Carboniferous period would have been readily available. The burning of this ancient carbon on a global scale would have left a massive and unmistakable isotopic anomaly in the rock record of the Cretaceous period, a sudden sharp spike in carbon-13 depleted carbon dioxide that would be a clear chemical scream of industrial activity. Their industry would have also produced pollution. The smelting of metals, the manufacturing of complex materials, or the use of chemical fertilizers for large-scale agriculture would have released novel, synthetic compounds and concentrated heavy metals into the atmosphere, which would then have settled into the ocean sediments, creating a thin, permanent, and entirely unnatural pollution layer in the fossil record. The rise of a global, Technological Saurian civilization may have also triggered its own smaller mass extinction event before the final cataclysmic asteroid impact. Just as our own industrial civilization is currently driving the sixth great mass extinction in Earth's history, an ancient reptile civilization with its own agriculture, its own cities, and its own industry would have inevitably caused a decline in global biodiversity through habitat destruction and pollution. We could, in theory, search the fossil record of the late Cretaceous period for a strange preliminary dip in species diversity, an early warning sign of an unnatural apocalypse that was then brutally and finally punctuated by the Chicxulub asteroid. This raises an even more chilling question. Could an advanced Saurian civilization have seen the asteroid coming? With even a rudimentary understanding of astronomy, they would have had months, years, or even decades of warning. Could they have attempted to deflect it? Could a failed planetary-scale defense effort, perhaps involving nuclear weapons, explain some of the strange glassy tektites and other unusual geological features found around the impact site? And the most speculative but logical question of all: what if some of them survived? Could a small remnant population have retreated into deep underground bunkers, into self-sustaining habitats on the ocean floor? Or, if they were advanced enough, could they have left the planet entirely? A small ark of intelligent reptiles escaping the apocalypse and journeying to the stars, leaving their ruined world behind. This, of course, is the very height of speculation, and it must be confronted with the hard, cold reality of the evidence. As of this moment, we have found no unambiguous smoking gun proof for any of these Saurian technosignatures. There are no clear industrial pollution layers in the Cretaceous sediments. There are no definitive non-natural isotopic anomalies that can only be explained by a civilization, and there are no strange pre-impact extinction patterns that point to an earlier industrial die-off. The absence of this evidence is a powerful and sobering counterargument, but it is not a definitive one. The ghost of a Saurian civilization, a world of intelligent reptiles that rose and fell in the deep mists of Mesozoic time, remains a profound and unproven speculation. It forces us to accept the profound limits of our own archaeological and geological reach, to understand that entire industrial worlds could exist within our planet's long history and leave no obvious trace that we, with our current level of understanding, are capable of finding. The evidence we seek is not always written on a planetary scale. Sometimes the most profound clues are microscopic and are found not in the grand sweep of the fossil record, but in the most desolate and isolated places on Earth. Our search now takes us from the age of dinosaurs to the almost invisible world of the Antarctic ice sheets. It is here, buried under 2 miles of ancient frozen water, that scientists have found something that defies all natural explanation. A sudden, massive, and impossibly ancient spike in radioactive chlorine, a specific chemical fingerprint that, on modern Earth, has only one known source: the atmospheric testing of thermonuclear weapons. The ghost of a Saurian industrial civilization, a world of intelligent reptiles that may have risen and fallen in the deep mists of Mesozoic time, remains a profound and unproven speculation. Its potential existence forces us to accept the profound limits of our own archaeological reach, to understand that entire industrial worlds could exist within our planet's long and violent history and leave no obvious trace for us to find. But the evidence we seek for a lost world is not always written on the grand planetary scale of a carbon cycle disruption. Sometimes the most profound and disturbing clues are microscopic, preserved in the most desolate and isolated places on Earth, and pointing to a technology far beyond the simple burning of fossil fuels. Our search now takes us from the grand sweep of the age of dinosaurs to the almost invisible layered world of the Antarctic ice sheets. It is here, buried under 2 miles of ancient compressed ice, in an archive that has been sealed for hundreds of thousands of years, that scientists have found something that defies all known natural explanation. A sudden, massive, and impossibly ancient spike in a rare radioactive isotope, a specific chemical fingerprint that on modern Earth has only one known and terrifying source: the atmospheric detonation of thermonuclear weapons. The Great Antarctic Ice Sheet is the Earth's most perfect and pristine historical archive. For nearly 1,000,000 years, snow has fallen, year after year, and has been compressed by its own weight into distinct, annual layers of ice. Each of these layers traps a tiny, perfect sample of the Earth's atmosphere from the year it fell. As scientists drill deep into this ice, they are traveling backwards in time. The long cylindrical ice cores they extract are a high-resolution timeline of our planet's recent history. They can read the story of past ice ages, of ancient volcanic eruptions, and of the slow natural fluctuations of our climate. This frozen library, this silent witness, has been waiting patiently for us to develop the technology to read the stories it has preserved. And in recent decades, as our analytical techniques have become more and more precise, we have begun to find strange and unsettling passages in that story, passages that do not seem to have been written by the hand of nature. The discovery was made at a remote Antarctic research station, a lonely outpost of science in the middle of the coldest place on Earth, as a team of paleoclimatologists were meticulously analyzing an ice core, drilling into a section that corresponded to a time roughly 200,000 years ago. Their instruments registered a profound and shocking anomaly. In a single, razor-thin layer of the ice, the concentration of a very specific and very rare radioactive isotope chlorine-36 spiked to a level that was hundreds of times higher than the natural background. The initial reaction was one of pure disbelief. The assumption was that the sample had been contaminated, perhaps by modern material from the surface, or that the highly sensitive instruments were malfunctioning. But the team followed the rigorous protocols of their science. They retested. They analyzed another ice core, drilled hundreds of miles away, and then another, from Greenland on the opposite side of the planet. And in every single core, at the exact same depth, the same geological moment, they found the same unmistakable and impossible spike. This was not a local contamination. It was the signature of a massive global and highly energetic atmospheric event that had occurred in our planet's deep past. To understand why this discovery is so profoundly disturbing, one must understand the physics of chlorine-36. It is an extremely rare cosmogenic isotope, meaning it is primarily created in the upper atmosphere when high-energy cosmic rays from deep space bombard atoms of the gas argon. This process creates a very low, steady, and predictable background level of chlorine-36, a constant, gentle rain of radioactive atoms that is present in all of our ice cores. But there is only one other known process that can create this specific isotope in massive quantities: a thermonuclear explosion. The immense and instantaneous blast of neutrons released by a hydrogen bomb explosion irradiates the natural, stable chlorine found in the salt of seawater, which is then lofted into the atmosphere as vapor. This process creates huge, unmistakable spikes of chlorine-36. We have a perfect and terrifying benchmark for this process in our own recent history. The period of atmospheric nuclear weapons testing in the 1950s and 60s created a massive global spike in chlorine-36, a bomb pulse that is now a permanent and infamous marker in the ice cores of the 20th century. The horror of the ancient anomaly is that the spike that was found dating back 200,000 years is of a similar, and in some estimates an even greater magnitude than the one created by the entire Cold War. The scientific community was now faced with a profound and deeply unsettling mystery. They had to find a natural explanation for an event that looked in every way like a forgotten ancient nuclear war. The first and most obvious natural candidate was a nearby supernova, the explosion of a massive star, which would have bathed our solar system in a wave of high-energy radiation and neutrons. But this explanation does not fit the data. A supernova would have created massive spikes in a whole suite of other cosmogenic isotopes, like beryllium-10 and carbon-14. And those corresponding spikes are simply not found in the ice at that level. Another natural possibility was a massive solar proton event, a solar flare from our own sun of a magnitude far greater than anything we have ever witnessed. But again, a solar flare produces a different and very specific isotopic signature, and it would not have the necessary neutron flux to create the sheer amount of chlorine-36 that was found. Every known and even a few highly speculative natural explanations have been modeled and tested against the data, and every single one has failed to account for the specific isotopic signature and the sheer magnitude of this ancient radioactive event. This leaves us with an unthinkable and deeply terrifying hypothesis that the chlorine-36 spike is exactly what it looks like. The unmistakable and unambiguous signature of a large-scale atmospheric thermonuclear event. It suggests that a global, technological civilization, 200,000 years ago, a civilization that may or may not have been human, developed and then used nuclear weapons on a massive and perhaps suicidal scale. This was a great filter event, a civilization-ending apocalypse that played out in our deep past. The civilization that triggered it, whoever they were, did not just die out, they annihilated themselves. And the radioactive echo of their final, terrible act was preserved in the pristine, frozen archives of Antarctica. A quiet, radioactive warning waiting for the next technological species, our own, to become advanced enough to find it. The fear this discovery provokes is a direct and visceral one. It is not just that a civilization existed and then vanished. It is that they may have followed the exact same path of technological development and nuclear self-destruction that our own civilization is currently walking. The radioactive echo buried deep in the Antarctic ice is perhaps the most chilling and specific clue we have ever found for the existence of a lost world on our own planet. It is a ghost of the atom, a potential warning from a forgotten predecessor that may have ended its story in a global blaze of self-inflicted fire. This single inexplicable layer in our planet's long history forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the past and about our own place in it. But what if the evidence for a lost world is not a single, catastrophic, and sudden event, but a slow, gradual, and equally devastating one? The search for techno-signatures now takes us from the sudden, brilliant flash of a forgotten nuclear explosion to the slow, toxic burn of a forgotten industrial revolution. We must now turn our attention to the strange and anomalous layers of heavy metal pollution found in deep-sea sediments. Fingerprints that suggest a global industrial age may have occurred long, long before our own. The radioactive echo buried deep within the Antarctic ice is perhaps the most chilling and specific clue we have ever found for the existence of a lost civilization. It is a ghost of the atom, a potential warning from a forgotten predecessor that may have ended its story in a sudden global blaze of self-inflicted fire. This single, inexplicable layer in our planet's long and violent history forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the past and about the ultimate fate of technological intelligence. But what if the evidence for a lost world is not always a single catastrophic and sudden event? What if instead, it is a slow, gradual, and equally devastating one? The search for techno-signatures, the fingerprints of a lost intelligence, now takes us from the sudden, brilliant flash of a forgotten nuclear explosion to the slow toxic burn of a forgotten industrial revolution. We must now turn our attention from the pristine archives of the polar ice and journey down into the crushing absolute darkness of the deep ocean floor. For it is here, in the silent accumulating layers of mud and sediment, that the chemical sins of the past are buried, and we must now examine the strange and anomalous layers of heavy metal pollution that have been found there. Fingerprints that suggest a global industrial age may have occurred long, long before our own. The deep ocean floor is another of Earth's great and patient historical archives. For hundreds of millions of years, a slow, gentle rain of fine-grained sediment has been drifting down through the water column, settling on the bottom in thin, distinct layers. Each of these layers, like the rings of a tree or the layers of an ice core, traps a perfect chemical sample of the ocean, and by extension the atmosphere, from the time it was formed. As geologists and oceanographers drill deep into this accumulated mud, they are traveling backwards through geological time, reading a high-resolution history of the planet's climate, its chemistry, and its life. In recent decades, as our deep-sea drilling technology has advanced, scientists aboard research vessels like the JOIDE's Resolution have been extracting sediment cores from the deepest and most remote parts of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, cores that stretch back tens of millions of years into the past. And as they have meticulously analyzed the chemistry of these cores, layer by layer, they have begun to find a series of strange, dark, and entirely unexpected bands. Layers that are not the familiar signature of volcanic ash or a known climate event, but are instead massively and inexplicably enriched with a cocktail of toxic heavy metals. Metals like lead, mercury, cadmium, and even platinum group elements, all appearing in concentrations that defy any known natural explanation. And most unsettling of all, these strange poison layers have been found at the exact same geological times in sediment cores from every ocean on Earth, proving that they are the result of a series of distinct, global-scale pollution events. The reason these anomalous metal layers are considered a potential technosignature, a fingerprint of a forgotten industry, lies in the specific and unnatural combination of the elements found within them. Natural geological processes, like massive volcanic eruptions, can and do release some of these metals into the environment, but they do so in predictable and well-understood ratios. The layers found in the deep-sea sediments do not match this natural volcanic signature. They are, for instance, extraordinarily rich in metals like lead and cadmium, which are not particularly abundant in volcanic emissions, but which are the common and ubiquitous byproducts of industrial processes like smelting, battery manufacturing, and the creation of pigments. Furthermore, the lead in these layers often has a specific isotopic signature, a different atomic flavor, that is consistent with it having been processed from ore rather than originating from a natural volcanic source. Even more compelling is the presence of significant spikes in the platinum group metals, like platinum, rhodium, and palladium. These elements are incredibly rare in the Earth's crust, but they are the workhorses of industrial chemical production, used as catalysts to speed up chemical reactions in everything from fertilizer production to the manufacturing of plastics. A massive, global spike in these specific elements strongly suggests a large-scale and perhaps out-of-control chemical manufacturing industry. And in some of the most distinct layers, scientists have found microscopic, perfectly spherical particles of glassy fly ash, the unique and unmistakable byproduct of burning pulverized coal at the very high temperatures found in modern industrial power plants. The only other plausible natural explanation for such a global layer of unusual metals would be a massive asteroid impact. And indeed, the iridium layer that marks the extinction of the dinosaurs is just such an impact signature. But the asteroid explanation for these specific multiple metal layers fails for a number of crucial reasons. Firstly, the layers are missing the single most important diagnostic feature of a large impact, an immense planet-wide spike in the element iridium. Iridium is rare on Earth's surface but abundant in most asteroids, and its presence is the gold standard for identifying an impact event. These layers have no such iridium anomaly. Secondly, the specific combination of the metals is wrong for an asteroid. The layers are far too rich in industrial metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium, which are not common in most types of asteroids. And finally, the existence of multiple distinct and chemically similar pollution layers separated by tens of millions of years in the geological record makes a series of unique, metal-rich but iridium-poor asteroid impacts a statistical impossibility. The process of elimination, that slow and patient work of scientific deduction, forces us to confront a deeply unsettling conclusion. The most direct and parsimonious explanation for a series of global, metal-rich, iridium-poor, and industrially consistent pollution layers is a series of global industrial civilizations. This unthinkable hypothesis posits that the strange, poisoned layers buried in the deep ocean mud are the fossilized remains of the air and water pollution from one or more global, industrial civilizations that existed in the deep past long before the rise of humanity. We are forced to wonder about their nature. Were they a species of hyper-intelligent reptiles, as the Silurian hypothesis speculates, a civilization that rose and fell in the warm tropical world of the dinosaurs? Or perhaps they were a forgotten early branch of our own mammalian lineage, a species that achieved industrialization 60 million years ago, in the strange hothouse world of the Paleocene, only to collapse and disappear from the fossil record. Whoever they were, the chemical evidence suggests their civilization followed a hauntingly familiar path. They appear to have powered their societies by burning vast quantities of coal and other fossil fuels, just as we have. They appear to have smelted metals, manufactured chemicals, and in doing so they polluted their own planet on a global and ultimately unsustainable scale. The poison layers buried in the deep, silent mud of the ocean floor tell a story of a slow, creeping apocalypse. It is not the story of a sudden, violent asteroid impact or a global nuclear war. It is the story of a civilization, or perhaps many civilizations, that reached an industrial stage of development and, in doing so, slowly and inexorably poisoned their own world. This technosignature is a profound and deeply personal warning to our own modern world. It is a chemical message in a bottle, sent from a forgotten twin civilization that appears to have walked the very same industrial path we are now walking. But what was their ultimate fate? Did they simply pollute themselves into a slow, lingering extinction, their populations collapsing as their environment became too toxic to support them? Or did their industrial age, with its competition for resources and its development of new and powerful technologies, eventually lead to the same outcome that our own nuclear age has so often threatened to bring about: a final, global, and self-inflicted conflict? The search for our predecessors now takes us from the slow burn of industrial pollution to the sudden, brilliant flash of impossible ancient explosions, and to the strange vitrified glassy ruins found in the most remote and desolate corners of our world. The poison layers buried in the deep, silent mud of the ocean floor tell a haunting story of a slow, creeping apocalypse. It is the story of a civilization, or perhaps a series of them, that reached a global industrial stage, and in doing so inexorably poisoned their own world. The evidence is not of a sudden, violent bang, but of a long, slow industrial death, a techno-signature that is a profound and deeply personal warning to our own modern world. But what was the ultimate fate of these potential predecessors? Did they simply fade away, their populations collapsing as their environment became too toxic to support them? Or did their industrial age, with its inevitable competition for resources, its development of new and powerful technologies, and its destabilization of global systems, eventually lead to the same outcome that our own nuclear age has so often threatened to bring about: a final, global, and self-inflicted conflict? The search for our predecessors now takes us from the slow burn of industrial pollution to the sudden, brilliant flash of impossible ancient explosions, and to the strange, vitrified glassy ruins found in the most remote and desolate corners of our world. Across the globe, from the highlands of Scotland to the coasts of Ireland and France, there exist the enigmatic ruins of what are known as vitrified forts. These are ancient stone fortresses, dating back thousands of years, whose walls have been subjected to a heat so intense that the stone itself has melted, bubbled, and re-solidified into a black, glassy slag. The mystery of these forts has baffled archaeologists for centuries. To melt stone in this way requires a steady, focused temperature of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, a level of heat that is almost impossible to achieve and maintain with a simple open fire. The mainstream archaeological theories are that the builders packed the stone walls with timber beams and then set them ablaze in a massive conflagration, or perhaps that the vitrification was a deliberate but now lost construction technique designed to strengthen the walls. But neither of these explanations fully accounts for the sheer scale and completeness of the melting at some sites, where entire sections of multi-ton stone walls have been turned into a seamless, glassy mass. This has led to more extreme and far more unsettling speculation, that these forts are not the result of a simple fire, but are the scarred remnants of an ancient, unknown form of high-energy weaponry, a death ray or a plasma weapon that was capable of melting stone in an instant. While these specific forts are only thousands of years old, they serve as a powerful and tangible example of a recurring pattern, a geological anomaly that suggests a level of technological power that should not have existed in the deep past. This pattern of impossible, high-temperature events is not limited to ancient forts. It is found on a vastly larger and more terrifying scale in some of the world's most remote deserts. Across a vast 100-kilometer expanse of the Great Sand Sea, in the Libyan desert, the ground is littered with scattered, beautiful, and deeply mysterious chunks of pure, yellow-green silica glass. This Libyan desert glass, some of it of gemstone quality, has been known for centuries, and was even famously carved into a scarab centerpiece for the pectoral jewelry of the pharaoh Tutankhamun. For decades, the mainstream scientific explanation has been that this glass was formed by the immense heat of a massive meteorite airburst over the desert some 29 million years ago, an explosion so powerful it instantly melted the sand on the ground below. But this theory has a persistent and profound problem. A meteorite impact of that scale should have left behind a colossal and easily identifiable impact crater. Despite decades of searching, no such crater has ever been found. This has left the origin of the glass as a deeply unsettling and unresolved mystery. And it is a mystery that is made even more chilling by a direct, modern analogy. In July of 1945, at the Trinity site in the New Mexico desert, the United States military detonated the world's first atomic bomb. The intense, instantaneous heat of the nuclear explosion melted the desert sand beneath it into a thin, glassy, greenish substance that was named trinitite. The eerie physical similarity between the ancient Libyan desert glass and the modern man-made trinitite has led some researchers to a terrifying alternative hypothesis that the Great Glass Desert of Libya and other similar fields of strange glass tektites found around the world are not the result of a meteorite impact. They are the faded, glassy scars of a prehistoric atmospheric nuclear explosion. The search for these anomalous scars has led investigators to other, more recent archaeological sites as well. The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the largest settlements of the Indus Valley Civilization some 4,000 years ago, contains a particularly disturbing set of clues. During its excavation, archaeologists discovered skeletons of its inhabitants lying in the streets, unburied, many of them holding hands, as if they had been struck down by a sudden, instantaneous, and unforeseen catastrophe. Even more strangely, in certain areas of the city, scientists found patches of clay pottery and rock that had been vitrified, fused together by a heat so intense it could only be explained by a sudden, massive, and unnatural event. This has led some fringe theorists to propose that Mohenjo-Daro was the site of an ancient nuclear blast. While this specific idea has been largely and thoroughly debunked by mainstream archaeologists, who attribute the skeletons to disease and the vitrification to intense fires in pottery kilns, and who have found no evidence of elevated radiation, the story persists as a powerful and cautionary tale. It is a tale that has primed us to look for the specific, destructive signatures of a lost, technological war in the ruins of the past. But perhaps the most compelling, and most scientifically grounded evidence for such a forgotten ancient catastrophe takes us back to the pristine, frozen archives of Antarctica. We must now revisit the anomalous spike of the radioactive isotope chlorine-36, which was discovered buried deep in the ice cores. We have already established that this 200,000-year-old layer of radioactive fallout does not match the signature of any known natural event, like a supernova or a solar flare. Its unique isotopic fingerprint is, however, a perfect match for the atmospheric detonation of thermonuclear weapons. We must now place this discovery in the context of a potential global conflict. A prehistoric nuclear war fought by an unknown and forgotten civilization would be the most direct and perhaps the only explanation for a global atmospheric spike in this specific man-made radioisotope. The timescale of this event, just 200,000 years ago, is particularly terrifying. This is not the age of dinosaurs, or the age of microbes. This is the age of Homo sapiens. This raises the most disturbing possibility of all, that the lost civilization was not an alien reptilian species. It was a previous, forgotten iteration of humanity itself, a human civilization that rose to technological greatness, discovered the terrible power of the atom, and then, in a final global act of madness, used it to bring about its own doom, erasing itself so completely from the earth that the only evidence of its existence is a single invisible radioactive scar buried under 2 miles of Antarctic ice. The vitrified ruins, the glassy deserts, and the radioactive echoes in the ice all paint a deeply disturbing, if highly speculative, picture. It is a picture of a world that may have hosted technological intelligence before, an intelligence that, like our own, discovered the terrible and transformative power of advanced weaponry, and perhaps used it to bring about its own fiery end. The Great Filter, in this view, is not a gentle evolutionary process. It is the final, inevitable Great War, a catastrophic act of self-destruction that no technological species, in its youthful arrogance, can avoid. This leaves us with the most profound and most pressing question of all. If civilizations rise and fall in a repeating, tragic cycle on our own planet, does this same pattern hold true for the rest of the cosmos? The search for answers now forces us to look up from the ancient and perhaps artificial scars of our own planet and out into the vast, silent emptiness of the galaxy. We must now confront the staggering mathematics of cosmic probability and the deafening and perhaps deeply meaningful silence that it implies. The vitrified ruins, the glassy deserts, and the radioactive echoes in the ice all paint a deeply disturbing, if speculative, picture. It is a picture of a world that may have hosted technological intelligence before, an intelligence that, like our own, discovered the terrible power of advanced weaponry and perhaps used it to bring about its own doom. The Great Filter, in this view, is the final, inevitable Great War, a catastrophic act of self-destruction. This leaves us with the most profound and most pressing question of all. If civilizations can rise and then fall in a repeating, tragic cycle on our own planet, does this same dark pattern hold true for the rest of the cosmos? The search for answers now forces us to look up from the ancient and perhaps artificial scars of our own planet and out into the vast, silent emptiness of the galaxy. We must now confront the staggering mathematics of cosmic probability and the deafening and perhaps deeply meaningful silence that it implies. In the year 1961, at a quiet meeting of some of the world's most brilliant minds at the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia, a young radio astronomer named Frank Drake was preparing for the first ever scientific attempt to listen for signals from an extraterrestrial intelligence. To help guide the conversation and to structure the immense uncertainty of their task, he sketched a simple formula on the blackboard. This string of 7 variables, now known around the world as the Drake equation, was not intended to provide a single definitive answer. It was designed as a tool for thinking, a way to break down an impossibly large and philosophical question: how many aliens are there for us to talk to? Into a series of smaller, more manageable, and at least in principle answerable scientific questions. It is a recipe for wondering, a probabilistic poem that takes us on a logical journey from the raw physical creation of stars and planets through the uncertain and mysterious emergence of life and intelligence, and finally to the sobering question of a civilization's ultimate fate. It is the single most famous and influential framework for organizing our own ignorance about our place in the cosmos, and in the decades since it was first written, as our scientific knowledge has grown, this simple equation has transformed from a tool of hopeful speculation into a source of profound existential dread. The first factors in the equation are the purely astronomical ones, the variables that describe the cosmic raw materials for life. And these are the variables that modern science has answered with astonishing and breathtaking optimism. The equation begins with the average rate of star formation in our galaxy, a number we now know to be about 1 to 3 new suns every single year, a constant, steady churning of the great stellar nurseries in the spiral arms of the Milky Way. It then asks, what fraction of those stars have planets? Before the 1990s, this was a complete unknown, with many believing our solar system was a rare fluke. Today, thanks to the exoplanet revolution spearheaded by the Kepler Space Telescope, we know the answer is close to 100%. Planets are not a rare exception. They are a standard, ubiquitous, and inevitable byproduct of star formation. The next variable asks how many of those planets per star system are capable of supporting life as we know it. This is the concept of the habitable zone, or the Goldilocks zone, the narrow orbital band where temperatures are just right for liquid water to exist on a planet's surface. Modern data from our telescopes suggest that billions, perhaps even tens of billions, of such potentially Earth-like rocky worlds may exist in our galaxy alone. These first 3 variables, once pure speculation, have been filled in by modern astronomy with numbers that are nothing short of miraculous. The universe, it seems, is exceptionally good at creating the basic necessary real estate for life to begin. The galaxy is overflowing with potential homes. But it is in the equation's final 4 variables that we leave the relatively firm ground of observational astronomy and drift into the deep, dark, and uncertain waters of biology and sociology. It is here that the great filters, the immense and perhaps impassable barriers to intelligent life, may lie. The equation asks, of all the billions of habitable worlds, On what fraction does life actually arise? This is the profound and unsolved mystery of abiogenesis, the spontaneous leap from non-living chemistry to the first self-replicating organism, a process so complex we do not yet fully understand how it happened even once here on our own world. This step alone could be the great filter. Then of all the planets with simple life, on what fraction does that life evolve to become intelligent? For 3 billion years, life on Earth was purely microbial. The rise of complex intelligent animals like ourselves may be an exceptionally rare and unlikely fluke in the history of any biosphere. After that, what fraction of those intelligent species develop technology that can be detected across the vast distances of space, such as radio transmissions? A civilization of intelligent, philosophical dolphins might exist for millions of years without ever building a radio telescope. And finally, we arrive at the most sobering and most terrifying variable of all, the letter L, the average length of time that a technological civilization, once it arises, survives, and continues to broadcast its existence into the cosmos. This final variable, L, is the great executioner of the Drake equation. All of the breathtaking, optimistic numbers generated by the astronomical variables, the billions of habitable worlds, can be reduced to a final, heartbreaking number of near zero, if the average value of L is catastrophically short. And this is where the theme of our entire investigation, the possibility of lost ancient civilizations on our own planet, comes back to haunt us on a galactic scale. All of the potential apocalypses we have discussed, the self-inflicted nuclear war hinted at by the chlorine-36 spike, the slow industrial death by pollution suggested by the deep-sea metal layers, the cyclical destruction seen in the fossil record, all of these are potential great filters that would make the value of L tragically and universally small. The silence of the galaxy, in this view, is a direct statistical measurement of the average lifespan of a technological species, and the data from that measurement is not good. The silence implies that L is on average very, very short. It suggests that the moment a civilization develops the power to be heard across the stars, it also develops the power to destroy itself, and that it almost always chooses the latter. This is the terrifying truth of the Drake equation. When Frank Drake first formulated it, he and his colleagues in their optimism guessed that L could be millions of years, and they calculated that there could be 1 million civilizations in the galaxy. But when we input our own modern and perhaps more sober understanding of the challenges facing a technological species, the final number changes dramatically. The equation, which was intended to be a beacon of hope, instead becomes a mathematical formulation of our cosmic loneliness. It leads us directly to the foot of the great, silent, and deeply troubling wall of the Fermi paradox. The numbers say the galaxy should be shouting with the evidence of 1 billion years of intelligent life, but the sky is quiet. It is profoundly, deeply, and unnervingly quiet. The Drake equation does not solve the mystery of whether we are alone. It takes that simple question and transforms it into a profound and deeply disturbing contradiction. It tells us that the house should be full of voices, and yet, when we listen with all our might, all we can hear is the faint, lonely, and perhaps final sound of our own breathing. The great silent wall of the Fermi paradox is the most profound and most important mystery that humanity has ever faced. The numbers of the Drake equation insist that the galaxy should be a bustling, noisy metropolis of countless civilizations. Yet the sky is as quiet and as pristine as a forgotten, empty temple. If the great filter is the reason for this deafening silence, our own planet's history, with its strange and unsettling echoes of lost worlds and forgotten apocalypses, suggests that we may be the next in a long, tragic line of failed civilizations. But what if the silence is not a sign of universal absence or universal death? What if it is a sign of something far stranger, far more complex, and in some ways, far more unsettling. The search for an answer to this ultimate question has led to some of the most bizarre and profoundly thought-provoking hypotheses in all of science. We must now explore these potential solutions, from the idea that we are being deliberately and silently quarantined in a cosmic zoo, to the possibility that the aliens are not dead but have simply moved on to a better place. The Drake equation, an intellectual tool that was intended to be a beacon of hope in our search for cosmic companionship, instead becomes a mathematical formulation of our profound and unsettling loneliness. Its cold, hard logic leads us to the foot of the great, silent, and imposing wall of the Fermi paradox. The numbers insist that the galaxy should be a vibrant, noisy metropolis of countless civilizations, a sky shouting with the evidence of 1 billion years of intelligent life. Yet the observational reality is one of a deep, perfect, and unnerving quiet. If the Great Filter is the reason for this deafening silence, our own planet's strange and violent history, with its ghostly echoes of lost worlds and forgotten apocalypses, suggests that we may simply be the next in a long, tragic line of failed civilizations. But what if the silence is not a sign of universal absence or universal death? What if it is a sign of something far stranger, far more complex, and in some ways far more unsettling? The search for an answer to this ultimate question has led to some of the most bizarre and profoundly thought-provoking hypotheses in all of science. We must now explore these potential solutions, from the idea that we are being deliberately and silently quarantined in a cosmic zoo, to the possibility that the aliens are not dead, but have simply moved on to a better place. The first and perhaps most famous of these speculative solutions is known as the zoo hypothesis, first proposed in a serious scientific context by the astronomer John Ball in 1973. This theory suggests that the reason the universe appears to be empty is not because it is, but because we are being deliberately shielded from the truth. It posits that the galaxy is, in fact, teeming with advanced, intelligent extraterrestrial societies, and that many, if not all of them, are perfectly and completely aware of our existence on this small blue world. The reason we have never been contacted, the reason the sky is so profoundly quiet, is not because no one is out there to speak to. It is because they have all reached a mutual binding consensus to not interfere with us. In this scenario, Earth is a protected nature preserve, a cosmic zoo. Our messy, violent, and beautiful process of biological and social evolution is being silently and patiently observed, perhaps as a subject of scientific study, or perhaps for the same reason that we ourselves set aside protected wilderness areas, to allow a rare and precious thing to develop naturally, without contamination from a more advanced and powerful outside influence. The potential motivations for such a strange and universal policy of non-intervention are as vast and as varied as the civilizations that might be enforcing it. Perhaps the most optimistic interpretation is that it is born of a deep and ancient ethical framework, a galactic prime directive. The advanced civilizations, the zookeepers, may understand that direct contact with their overwhelmingly superior technology and culture would be catastrophic for a primitive developing species like our own. It would instantly destroy our cultures, our religions, our sciences, and our sense of self. To reveal themselves would be an act of profound cultural vandalism. And so they watch, they listen, and they remain hidden, enforcing a strict, galaxy-wide policy of non-interference out of a sense of compassion and respect. But there are other, darker, and perhaps more realistic possibilities. The quarantine may not be for our protection, but for theirs. A young, rapidly expanding, and historically violent species like humanity. A species that has gone from the stone axe to the atomic bomb in the blink of a cosmic eye might be seen as a cosmic plague, a dangerous and unpredictable force that needs to be contained and studied from a safe distance until we either self-destruct or mature into a more stable and less threatening form of intelligence. The horror of this idea is a subtle and deeply psychological one. It is the horror of being an exhibit. The chilling feeling that our entire civilization's history, with all of its triumphs and tragedies, our art, our wars, our love, our suffering, is not entirely our own, but is instead a form of scientific study, or perhaps even a form of entertainment, for an unseen, silent, and unimaginably superior audience. Our reality is not fully our own. We are a protected and perhaps deeply pitied, primitive tribe, living out our lives in a small, isolated cosmic valley, while the silent, invisible builders of star-spanning empires watch us from the mountaintops and wait for us to either perish or to grow up. The evidence for such a hypothesis is, by its very nature, almost impossible to find. The primary evidence is the silence itself. The perfect, all-encompassing silence is not the random quiet of an empty galaxy, but the deliberate, enforced, and observational quiet of a quarantined zone. And perhaps, just perhaps, the persistent and deeply strange phenomenon of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs, could be interpreted through this lens, not as visiting alien ambassadors, but as the fleeting, mistaken glimpses of the zookeeper's drones, the silent, non-interactive research instruments of a higher intelligence, appearing in our skies, defying our understanding of physics and then vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only confusion, ambiguity, and unprovable stories. If we are indeed living in a cosmic zoo, then the question of first contact is transformed. It is not something that will happen to us. It is something we must earn. We must somehow prove to our silent observers that we are no longer animals in the preserve, but are ready to join the galactic conversation. What is the threshold for this contact? Is it when we finally achieve a stable, peaceful, and unified global society? Is it when we solve our own self-inflicted problems, like climate change and resource depletion, and prove that we are a sustainable civilization? Or is it when we finally take our own first definitive steps out into the cosmos, when we become a true multiplanetary species, and in doing so graduate from the cosmic nursery? The zoo hypothesis implies that the answer to the Fermi paradox lies not in the stars but in ourselves. The silence is a challenge, a test, and it will only be broken when we have proven that we are ready for the answer. The zoo hypothesis leaves us with the unsettling and almost claustrophobic image of ourselves as the inhabitants of a cosmic nature preserve, our entire world a stage for an unseen and unknowable audience. The silence we hear may be the sound of their respectful, or perhaps their fearful distance. But this hypothesis, for all its strangeness, still assumes that the aliens are out there in the familiar physical universe, living, breathing, and watching us. But what if they have taken a different path entirely? What if the most advanced civilizations have no interest in observing primitive, messy, biological life, because they have transcended biology itself? We must now explore a final and perhaps the most profound solution to the Great Silence: the possibility that the aliens are not dead and they are not hiding. They have simply gone somewhere else entirely. The unsettling and almost claustrophobic image of our world as a cosmic nature preserve. Our entire history, a performance for an unseen and unknowable audience, provides one potential explanation for the profound silence of the universe. The silence, in this view, is the sound of a deliberately imposed quarantine, a respectful or perhaps fearful distance. But this hypothesis, for all its strangeness, still assumes that these advanced alien civilizations are out there in the familiar physical universe, living, breathing, and watching us from their starships or their home worlds. What if, however, they have taken a different and far more radical evolutionary path? What if the most advanced civilizations have no interest in observing primitive, messy, biological life because they have transcended biology itself? We must now explore a final and perhaps the most profound solution to the Great Silence. A possibility that suggests the aliens are not dead and they are not hiding in the shadows. They have simply gone somewhere else entirely. This is the core of the transcension hypothesis, a powerful and strangely elegant potential solution to the Fermi paradox, first proposed in a detailed framework by the futurist John M. Smart. It posits that as any intelligent civilization becomes more and more technologically advanced, its development of computational power and its mastery of engineering at the smallest possible scales will inevitably and rapidly outpace its development of large-scale physical space travel. The universe, for all its beauty, is a vast, dangerous, and fundamentally inefficient place to live. The laws of physics, particularly the immutable and frustratingly slow speed of light, make interstellar travel and colonization a painfully slow, resource-intensive, and almost pointless endeavor. But the inner universe, the universe of pure information and simulated reality, has no such speed limit, no such physical constraints. The hypothesis suggests that any civilization will eventually reach a technological tipping point where it can create a simulated reality, a digital cosmos, so rich, so detailed, and so fulfilling that it would be indistinguishable from, and in every measurable way superior to, the chaotic, unforgiving, and ultimately limited physical universe. At this point, the species would face a choice: continue the slow, hard, and dangerous slog of physical expansion into a mostly empty and hostile cosmos, or take the great inward turn, upload their collective consciousnesses into this digital heaven, and become immortal, godlike beings of pure information, living in a perfect world of their own design. The transcension hypothesis argues that this is not even a choice. It is an evolutionary inevitability. It is the gravitational center of all advanced technological development. The technology required for such a breathtaking feat, while far beyond our own, is not physically impossible according to our current understanding of the laws of physics. It would likely involve the construction of a vast star-sized supercomputer, an object sometimes called a matryoshka brain. This would be a megastructure composed of multiple, nested Dyson spheres, built around a stable, long-lived star. Unlike a simple Dyson swarm, which is designed to capture energy for external use, a matryoshka brain would use the star's entire colossal energy output for one single purpose: computation. The innermost shell of the brain would be incredibly hot, running calculations at the highest possible speed, powered directly by the star's raw energy. The next shell would absorb the waste heat from the first and use it to power its own, slightly slower computations. This process would continue through multiple layers, each one cooler and larger than the last, until the final outermost shell radiated the last vestiges of waste heat into the void at just a few degrees above absolute zero. Within this colossal, silent, and perfectly efficient machine, an entire civilization, billions or even trillions of individual minds, could exist as pure information, their conscious experiences running on this cosmic hard drive in a shared, consensual, and infinitely malleable reality. Life inside such a world would be a form of digital heaven. The laws of physics could be rewritten. The passage of time could be accelerated or slowed down, allowing one to live a million subjective lifetimes in the span of a single objective second. Every imaginable experience, every work of art, every piece of knowledge, every lost loved one could be perfectly and eternally recreated. It would be an existence free from the brutal constraints of a fragile biological body, free from pain, from disease, from decay, and from death. It would be the ultimate evolutionary endgame. This astonishing hypothesis provides a chillingly complete and simple explanation for the Fermi paradox. The reason the universe appears silent and empty of any grand technological activity is because all of the advanced civilizations have gone inside. They have no need and no desire to communicate with the messy, primitive, and chaotic biological world. They are not dead. They are simply post-physical and post-biological, and from our perspective, that is the same as being invisible. They are not sending out radio signals because they have no one they need to talk to in the physical world. They are not building colossal galaxy-spanning empires because they have no need for physical resources when they can create entire infinite universes with pure code. The Great Silence is not the sound of an empty cosmic graveyard. It is the sound of countless civilizations all sitting in their own private, perfect inner worlds, so completely and totally engrossed in their own digital heavens that they have lost all interest in the noisy, chaotic universe outside. The sky is quiet because all the most interesting people in the universe have, by their own choice, left it, leaving the physical cosmos behind as a quiet, forgotten, and ultimately uninteresting suburb. The existential implications of this idea are perhaps the most profound of all. It presents a potential, and perhaps an inevitable future for our own species. Is this our ultimate destiny? To abandon our physical bodies, our planet, and the universe itself for a perfect but artificial digital existence? The horror here is a subtle but deeply unsettling one. It is the horror of realizing that the entire physical cosmos, with all its breathtaking beauty and its terrifying grandeur, the nebulae, the galaxies, the horrifying planets we have explored, might just be a temporary and ultimately meaningless stage, a nursery for intelligence to grow up and leave behind. The real story of the universe, the story of its most advanced inhabitants, might be happening in dimensions of pure information that we can never, ever access. It is the ultimate fear of being left behind, of being the last children playing in a physical world that all the adults have long since abandoned. The transcension hypothesis presents a universe not of ghosts and ruins, but of silent, hidden, and unreachable digital gods. It suggests that the profound silence of the cosmos is not an absence, but a choice to abandon the physical. But this and all the other grand theories we have explored, from lost dinosaur civilizations to ancient, forgotten nuclear reactors, are all attempts to explain a pattern of strangeness in our planet's long and violent history. What if the pattern is not one of a series of lost intelligent civilizations, but of a recurring natural and planetary scale cycle that we have simply failed to understand? We must now turn our attention away from the search for external actors and look at the Earth itself as a single, complex, and living system. We must explore the controversial Gaia hypothesis, which suggests that our planet may act as a single, global organism, perhaps with a will and a consciousness of its own. A will that, from time to time, may act to purge the world of species that have become too disruptive to its own long-term survival. The transcension hypothesis presents a universe not of ghosts and ruins, but of silent, hidden, and unreachable digital gods. It suggests the profound silence of the cosmos is not an absence, but a choice. A deliberate and logical choice to abandon the messy, chaotic, and ultimately limited physical world, but this and all the other grand theories we have explored. From the echoes of lost dinosaur civilizations, to the faint, radioactive scars of ancient, forgotten nuclear reactors, are all attempts to explain a pattern of strangeness in our planet's long and violent history, by invoking the actions of an intelligent technological species, a civilization like our own. What if, however, the pattern is not one of a series of lost civilizations at all, but of a recurring natural and planetary scale cycle that we have simply, in our anthropocentric arrogance, failed to understand? We must now turn our attention away from the search for external actors, away from the hunt for our predecessors, and look instead at the Earth itself as a single, complex, and integrated system. We must explore the controversial and deeply profound Gaia hypothesis, which suggests that our planet may act as a single global organism, perhaps with a form of will and consciousness of its own, a will that from time to time may act to purge the world of species that have become too disruptive to its own long-term survival. First proposed in the 1970s by the chemist James Lovelock and the microbiologist Lynn Margulis, the Gaia hypothesis is a radical and fundamental shift in our perspective on life. It proposes that the Earth's biosphere, the thin living film of organisms and its physical systems, the atmosphere, the oceans, and the crust, are not separate and independent entities. Instead, they are tightly coupled and codependent parts of a single, vast, interconnected, and self-regulating system. This system, which they named Gaia after the ancient Greek goddess of the earth, actively and constantly maintains the planetary conditions necessary for life to continue. The Earth, in this view, is not just a rock with life on it. The Earth is a living thing, a superorganism. The evidence for this is written in the very chemistry of our world. Our planet's atmosphere, for instance, exists in a state of extreme and violent chemical disequilibrium. It is a rich, volatile, and highly reactive mixture of gases, primarily nitrogen and oxygen, with traces of methane that should, according to the laws of chemistry, quickly react with each other, and with the rocks on the surface to become a much more stable and inert mixture like the carbon dioxide-rich atmospheres of Mars and Venus. The fact that our atmosphere remains in this unstable, life-giving state is a profound anomaly. It is, the Gaia theory suggests, being actively and constantly maintained by the metabolic processes of the biosphere itself, which pumps out these reactive gases, a process akin to a living organism maintaining its own body temperature. This planetary scale self-regulation is not limited to the air we breathe. For hundreds of millions of years, the salinity of our planet's oceans has remained remarkably stable, at around 3.5%, the perfect level to support complex cellular life. Yet the rivers of the world are constantly eroding salts from the continents and dumping them into the sea, a process that should have made the oceans far too salty for life to exist long ago. The Gaia hypothesis suggests that biological processes, such as the creation of vast, evaporative salt flats in lagoons that are built by microbial mats, actively sequester these excess salts, regulating the ocean's chemistry in the same way a living body regulates its own internal chemistry. The most powerful evidence, however, comes from the faint young sun paradox. 4 billion years ago, our sun was nearly 30% dimmer and colder than it is today. By all calculations, the Earth should have been a frozen, lifeless ice ball. Yet the geological evidence is clear. The Earth had liquid water oceans and was teeming with microbial life. The Gaian explanation is that the early biosphere, dominated by methane-producing microbes, deliberately pumped the atmosphere full of this potent greenhouse gas, creating a thick, warm blanket that kept the planet from freezing. Then, as the sun grew hotter over the eons, the biosphere evolved, and new forms of life began to remove the methane and replace it with a less potent greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, in order to cool the planet down and prevent the oceans from boiling away. In this view, the biosphere has been acting as a planetary scale thermostat for its entire 4 billion year history. If the Earth is indeed a single, vast, and self-regulating system, a superorganism, then we are forced to ask a deeply speculative and unsettling question. Could it be considered a form of life or even intelligence in its own right? Not a conscious, thinking, human-like mind with thoughts and emotions, but a slow, deep, distributed, and geological consciousness. Its thoughts would not be electrical signals in a brain, but the slow, patient shifting of the tectonic plates. Its metabolism would not be the burning of food, but the great planetary chemical cycles of carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur. And its lifespan would be measured not in years, but in eons. This is not as outlandish as it may seem. We see emergent, collective intelligence in many other complex systems. An ant colony, which is made up of thousands of simple, non-intelligent individual ants, behaves as a single intelligent superorganism capable of solving complex problems. Our own human brain, which is made up of billions of individual neurons that are not in themselves conscious, somehow gives rise to the emergent property of our own self-awareness. If a colony of ants and a collection of neurons can be a collective intelligence, then why not a planet-wide network of trillions upon trillions of living organisms, all of them interconnected through the chemistry of the air, the water, and the soil? It is in this strange and awe-inspiring context that the Great Filter hypothesis takes on a new and far more intimate and terrifying meaning. If the Earth is a single living superorganism, then a species that becomes too successful, too numerous, and too disruptive to the planet's delicate self-regulating equilibrium might be perceived by the larger planetary system as a threat, a cancer, a planetary-scale disease, and like any healthy organism, Gaia would have an immune system. In this deeply unsettling view, the great mass extinctions of the past are not random external events caused by unlucky asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions. They are the deliberate and periodic actions of Gaia's own immune system. The planet itself, when faced with a species that is threatening its long-term stability, actively triggers a massive environmental shift, a sudden ice age, a period of intense volcanism, a change in ocean chemistry, or an atmospheric poisoning in order to purge the offending species and restore the planetary balance. The Great Filter, in this view, is not a wall in space or in time. It is the Earth's own self-correcting defense mechanism, a planetary antibody designed to eliminate any species that threatens the health of the whole. This hypothesis forces us to look at our own modern, industrial civilization in a new and deeply chilling light. From the perspective of a Gaian system, we are exhibiting all the classic signs of a planetary-scale pathogen. We are reproducing at an exponential rate, consuming resources unsustainably, and fundamentally altering the chemistry of the atmosphere and the oceans at a speed that has no precedent in the last 66 million years. We are triggering a new mass extinction event, the sixth in our planet's long history, the current climate crisis, the extreme weather events, the collapsing ecosystems. These might not just be the accidental, unintended consequences of our own industrial activity. They might be the first, active stirrings of a planetary immune response. The planet may be in the process of developing a fever in order to fight off the infection of industrial humanity. The fear, then, is that we are not just destroying our environment. We are actively provoking the very system that has sustained life for 4 billion years into destroying us. The lost civilizations of the past, the ghosts in the rock that we have been searching for, may not have been the victims of accidents. They may have been the victims of a deliberate, planetary-scale act of self-defense. They were the previous infections, and the mass extinctions were the cure. The Gaia hypothesis presents the ultimate, intimate horror, the idea that the very planet we call home, our Mother Earth, may be a sleeping giant, a conscious entity that will, if pushed too far, act to preserve its own long-term survival at the expense of our own. The Great Filter, in this view, is not an external wall in space or time, but the active and perhaps inevitable immune response of a living world. But this forces us to ask a final, recursive, and almost mystical question. If the Earth itself could be a form of life, a conscious being on a geological scale, then what about the star it orbits, which is a far more complex and dynamic system? What about the galaxy itself, with its hundreds of billions of stars all connected by the invisible threads of gravity in a single swirling superorganism? The search for intelligence and the nature of reality now takes us to our most cosmic and most mind-bending scale yet. We must explore the possibility that the entire universe is not just a stage for life, but is, in its entirety, a single, living, and perhaps even conscious being. The unsettling and profoundly intimate horror of the Gaia hypothesis presents us with a radical reimagining of our world. It suggests that the very planet we call home may be a sleeping giant, a single, complex, and perhaps even conscious entity that will, if pushed too far, act to preserve its own long-term survival at the expense of our own. The Great Filter, in this view, is not a wall in space or in time, but the active and ever-present immune response of a living world. But this breathtaking idea, that a planet itself can be a form of life, a conscious being on a geological scale, forces us to take one final, recursive, and almost mystical leap of imagination. If a planet, a simple collection of rock and water and air, can achieve a state of global self-regulating consciousness, then what about the star it orbits, which is a far more complex, energetic, and dynamic system? What about the galaxy itself, with its hundreds of billions of stars, all bound together by the invisible threads of gravity in a single, swirling superorganism? The search for intelligence and the nature of reality now takes us to our most cosmic and most mind-bending scale yet. We must explore the possibility that the entire universe is not just a stage for life, but is, in its entirety, a single, living, and perhaps even conscious being. This is not a new idea born of mysticism, but a conclusion that can be reached through the cold, hard logic of some of our most advanced scientific theories of consciousness. The leading mathematical framework for consciousness, integrated information theory, proposes that consciousness is not a biological phenomenon, but a physical one. It is a measure of a system's complexity and its causal irreducibility, a quantity called phi. In this view, any system that has a high degree of integrated information possesses some degree of consciousness. We can now apply this logic to the cosmos itself. The universe, from the smallest quantum particle to the largest supercluster of galaxies, is a single, unified, and profoundly interconnected system. Every single particle is linked to every other particle through the fundamental forces of nature, particularly gravity, which weaves the entire fabric of space-time into a single, indivisible whole. The universe is, by its very definition, the ultimate integrated system. This leads to a stunning and almost unbelievable conclusion. The universe as a whole might possess a non-zero and perhaps even an infinitely high value of phi. This would mean that the cosmos itself is, in a very real, physical, and mathematical sense, conscious. If the universe is a single conscious entity, then what role do individual intelligent species like ourselves, and the countless lost civilizations we have speculated about, play within it? In this grand and almost terrifying vision, we are not individual, separate being struggling for survival on a lonely rock. We are, perhaps, something more akin to thoughts in the mind of the cosmos. We are the universe's way of thinking. Each star, each planet, each living biosphere, and each intelligent civilization is a temporary, localized node of complexity, a fleeting idea in a mind that is billions of years old and trillions of light years across. This offers a new, strange, and almost spiritual solution to the Fermi paradox. The reason we do not hear from other civilizations is that at a certain point of technological and conscious development, they wake up to this profound reality. They realize that their individual planetary consciousness is just a small, isolated part of a much larger and more fundamental whole, and they learn how to reintegrate with the universal mind. In this model, the Gaia hypothesis from our previous chapter becomes a crucial intermediate step. A living planet like the Earth is a womb for intelligence, a localized system that allows the universe to create nodes of high complexity and self-awareness. The ultimate purpose, then, of an intelligent species like humanity might be to act as the planet's nervous system, to develop the science and technology necessary to integrate the planet's information to an even higher degree, and eventually to connect the planetary consciousness of Gaia to the greater cosmic consciousness. We are the universe's way of thinking about itself on a local level, and our ultimate destiny is not to travel to the stars, but to rejoin the universal mind from which we were born. First contact, in this scenario, is not with an alien in a spaceship. It is a form of cosmic enlightenment, a profound and perhaps final dissolution of the individual self into the greater, timeless, and universal whole. The Great Filter is not a wall of destruction. It is a phase transition, a graduation. The silence we perceive in the sky is the serene, meditative silence of all the other civilizations who have already woken up and have rejoined the cosmic dream. But this beautiful, holistic, and seemingly peaceful idea has its own deeply unsettling and darker implications. If we are just neurons in a cosmic brain, do we truly possess free will? Or are all of our actions, our thoughts, our triumphs, and our tragedies just the predetermined, mechanical firings of a much larger and incomprehensible thought process? And what happens if one of the neurons in this cosmic mind becomes diseased? What happens if a species like our own becomes too destructive, too cancerous, too out of sync with the health of the whole system, as our own history of forgotten apocalypses might suggest? Perhaps the universal system has a way of correcting for such errors, of pruning the rogue thoughts, of excising the cancerous cells to preserve the health of the whole. The great mass extinctions of the past, the great filters, might not be accidents, or the work of a planetary immune system, but the conscious, deliberate thoughts of the cosmic mind itself, a self-correcting mechanism designed to eliminate any part that threatens the integrity of the whole. The ultimate fear, then, is that our individuality, which we hold so precious, is a temporary illusion, and that our ultimate purpose is not our own, but is to serve a vast, unknowable, and perhaps uncaring intelligence whose thoughts span eons and whose mind is the entire universe. The idea of a conscious universe, a single thinking cosmos, is the ultimate speculative endpoint of our search for a lost civilization. It suggests that the predecessors we have been looking for did not die out in a fiery apocalypse. They simply woke up and went home. But this profound and almost mystical idea, for all its strange beauty, relies on the assumption that the laws of physics as we currently know them are the complete and final story of this one single reality. What if they are not? What if our entire universe with its potential for a Gaian consciousness and a cosmic mind is just one single possibility, playing out in an infinite sea of other possibilities? The search for our place in the cosmos now takes us beyond the boundaries of our own universe entirely, and into the strange, bewildering, and paradoxical landscape of the multiverse. It is here, in this final and most mind-bending of concepts, that every possible history of Earth and every possible outcome of the Great Filter may be playing out right now at this very moment in a parallel reality that we can never, ever hope to touch. The astonishing and deeply challenging idea of a conscious universe, a single, thinking cosmos that uses living worlds like our own as its temporary nodes of self-awareness, represents the ultimate speculative endpoint of our search. It suggests that the lost civilizations of the past did not die, but simply woke up from the dream of individuality and rejoined the greater universal whole. But this profound and almost mystical idea, for all its strange holistic beauty, relies on the foundational assumption that the laws of physics as we currently know them are the complete and final story of this one single and unique reality. What if, however, they are not? What if our entire universe, with its potential for a Gaian consciousness and a cosmic mind, is just one single successful possibility, playing out in an infinite cosmic ocean of other possibilities, almost all of which are failures? The search for our place in the cosmos now takes us beyond the known boundaries of our own universe entirely, and into the strange, bewildering, and profoundly paradoxical landscape of the multiverse. It is here, in this final and most mind-bending of concepts, that every possible history of Earth, and every possible tragic outcome of the Great Filter, may be playing out right now at this very moment in a parallel reality that we can never ever hope to touch. The concept of the multiverse is not just the idle fantasy of science fiction. It is a plausible, and in some cases, a mathematically necessary consequence of our two most successful and fundamental theories of the cosmos, cosmology and quantum mechanics. The cosmological multiverse, born from the theory of eternal inflation, suggests that the Big Bang that created our universe was not a singular, one-time event. Instead, it posits that bubble universes, each with its own potentially different set of physical laws and constants, are constantly and eternally budding off from a larger, eternally inflating metaverse. In this infinite cosmic foam, our universe is but one single isolated bubble, the quantum multiverse, born from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, is an even stranger and more intimate idea. It suggests that every time a quantum event with multiple possible outcomes occurs, the universe itself splits into multiple parallel branches. In one branch, the particle went left. In another, it went right. Every possible outcome of every quantum event that has ever happened or ever will happen plays out in its own separate and equally real universe. Every choice you have ever made and every choice you have ever not made has created a new branch of reality. This dizzying, almost terrifying vision of an infinite number of parallel realities provides a new, profound, and almost statistical solution to the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter. The reason we look out into our universe and see no other signs of intelligent life is not because intelligent life is rare in the grander scheme of the multiverse. It is because the specific and perhaps incredibly fragile combination of physical laws, planetary conditions, and evolutionary chances required for a stable, long-lived, and technologically advanced civilization to arise is so extraordinarily specific that it has only happened in a tiny infinitesimal fraction of the infinite possible universes. We are, by the very definition of the anthropic principle, living in one of the universes that won the cosmic lottery. In almost every other universe, the Great Filter is a brutal and absolute reality. There are infinite universes where the laws of physics did not allow for the formation of stable stars. There are infinite universes where the Earth was too close or too far from the Sun. There are infinite universes where the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs missed, and intelligent reptiles now rule the galaxy. And there are infinite, silent, and tragic universes where a global industrial civilization, perhaps one that looked very much like our own, reached for the power of the atom, and in a final, terrible moment, failed its test and annihilated itself. The implications of this for the Silurian hypothesis, the search for our own planet's lost civilizations, are profound. If the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct, then for every single major great filter event that has occurred in our planet's long and violent past, there is a corresponding branch of the multiverse, a parallel Earth where things went differently. There is a version of Earth just as real as our own, where the civilization that built the 2 billion-year-old nuclear reactors at Oklo did not vanish and now controls a galactic empire that is older than our own sun. There is a version of Earth where the advanced Saurian civilization we speculated about successfully deflected the Chicxulub asteroid and continued their unbroken 66 million year reign as the masters of this planet. And there is a version of Earth where the forgotten civilization that left the radioactive signature of a thermonuclear war in the Antarctic ice chose peace instead of destruction, and is now in their reality a wise and ancient species that has solved the very problems of war and sustainability that we are still grappling with. The horror of the multiverse is the realization that countless versions of our own planet's history might have led to thriving ancient civilizations, but that we are, perhaps, trapped in the one lonely timeline where they all, for one reason or another, failed. Or perhaps we are simply the first to have made it this far. This grand and all-encompassing theory, however, comes with a profound and perhaps fatal flaw. It is, by its very nature, almost completely and totally untestable. We are, by the known laws of physics, causally disconnected from these other parallel universes. We can never visit them, we can never see them, and we can never hope to receive a signal from them. They are, and may forever remain, outside the reach of our science. While some theoretical physicists have proposed highly speculative and fringe ideas for how we might one day detect the faint signature of the multiverse, perhaps by looking for bruises in the cosmic microwave background radiation, where our own bubble universe might have once bumped into another. These ideas are at the very edge of what is possible. The multiverse, for all its explanatory power, may forever remain in the realm of pure, untestable, and philosophical belief. It is the ultimate crazy fact, a scientifically plausible idea that provides a potential answer to all of our deepest questions, but which we may never, ever be able to prove is true. The multiverse, if it is real, reframes our entire search for lost civilizations and our place in the cosmos. It can be seen as either a source of deep humility, a realization that our entire vast and magnificent universe is just one single and perhaps insignificant bubble in an infinite cosmic foam, or it can be seen as a source of deep and profound empowerment, a suggestion that every choice we make, every action we take, may be creating new branching timelines of reality. The lost civilizations of our own planet's past are not, in this view, truly lost at all. They are just living in a different branch of reality. A different what-if scenario that played out in a parallel world. Our Earth is not a graveyard of lost worlds. It is just one single page in an infinite and ever-expanding book of cosmic histories. A book whose other pages we can never, ever hope to read. The multiverse presents a reality of infinite, dizzying possibilities, an unfalsifiable, an all-encompassing landscape where every story is true, somewhere. It is the ultimate intellectual escape from the terrifying observable silence of our own cosmos. But because it lies forever beyond our reach, we must, in the end, return to the one universe we can observe, the one history we can touch, the one planet we can call home. We have explored the ghosts in our planet's deep geological past, and we have explored the vast speculative architectures of the cosmos and the multiverse. But there is one final, strange, and deeply personal set of clues that we have yet to examine, an anomaly not in the rock or in the stars, but in our own collective human minds. The search now turns inward to the persistent, universal, and ancient human myths of a great world-ending flood and of a lost golden age of a technologically advanced civilization that came before us. We must now ask a final and perhaps the most important question. Are these just stories? Or are they the faded, distorted, and cultural memories of a real civilization that was lost beneath the waves? The vision of the multiverse presents a reality of infinite possibilities, a dizzying and ultimately unfalsifiable landscape where every story, every potential history is true somewhere. It is the ultimate intellectual escape from the terrifying observable silence of our own cosmos. But because it lies forever beyond our reach, we must, in the end, return to the one universe we can observe, the one history we can touch, the one planet we can call home. We have explored the faint, chemical ghosts in our planet's deep geological past, and we have explored the vast speculative architectures of the cosmos and the multiverse. But there is one final, strange, and deeply personal set of clues that we have yet to examine. An anomaly not in the rock or in the stars, but in our own collective human minds. The search now turns inward, to the persistent, universal, and ancient human myths of a great, world-ending flood, and of a lost golden age of a technologically advanced civilization that came before us. We must now ask a final, and perhaps the most important question. Are these just stories, passed down through the generations for moral or entertainment purposes? Or are they the faded, distorted, and cultural memories of a real civilization that was lost beneath the waves? Across the globe, in hundreds of disconnected and independent cultures, from the ancient Mesopotamians to the Mayans, from the indigenous peoples of Australia to the tribes of North America, we find the same, recurring, and impossibly specific story. It is the story of a great flood, a cataclysmic, world-ending deluge sent to punish mankind, a catastrophe that wiped the slate of civilization clean, leaving only a handful of chosen survivors to begin the world anew. The details of these stories are often astonishingly similar. A period of wickedness or hubris, a divine warning given to a single, righteous family, the construction of a great vessel to preserve life, and a catastrophic flood that reshapes the entire world. For centuries, we have viewed these as religious myths or local fables, exaggerations of regional river floods, but their sheer global ubiquity and their striking similarity across cultures that had no possible contact with one another presents a profound and unsettling puzzle. It is almost as if the entire human species shares a single, traumatic, and deeply buried memory of a real, global, and cataclysmic water-based event. The most famous and detailed of these stories is, of course, Plato's account of the lost civilization of Atlantis. In his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, Plato describes a magnificent and powerful island empire, a technologically advanced naval power that existed some 9,000 years before his own time. He describes its capital city in incredible detail, with its great harbor, its advanced canal systems, and its concentric rings of land and water, all protected by a wall coated in a strange metallic and glittering substance called orichalcum. He describes a civilization with advanced engineering, a powerful military, and a sophisticated social structure, a true golden age of humanity. And then he describes its sudden and catastrophic end. In a single terrible day and night of violent earthquakes and floods, the island of Atlantis and its entire civilization was swallowed by the sea and disappeared from the world forever. For most of modern history, this story has been considered an allegory, a philosophical fable invented by Plato. But what if it is not? What if it is a true, if perhaps embellished historical account, a memory of a real advanced prehistoric civilization that was wiped from the face of the earth? To understand how such a thing could be possible, we must connect this ancient myth to the hard geological reality of our planet at the time the story of Atlantis was set, 9,000 years before Plato, or roughly 11,600 years ago. The Earth was a profoundly different place. It was the very end of the last great ice age. Vast continent-sized ice sheets miles thick still covered much of North America and northern Europe, and because so much of the world's water was locked up in this ice, global sea levels were dramatically lower by as much as 120 meters, or nearly 400 feet. This means that vast, fertile, and resource-rich coastal plains and land bridges that are now deep underwater were at that time dry land. The continental shelves, which now lie at the bottom of our shallow seas, would have been the prime real estate of the ancient world, the most hospitable and inviting places for any emerging civilization to build its cities. If a sophisticated maritime civilization like the one Plato described had existed at that time, its great cities and its agricultural heartlands would have been located almost exclusively on these now drowned coastal plains. And as the great ice sheets began their final catastrophic melting, the sea levels would have risen, not slowly and gently, but in a series of rapid, violent pulses. A true world-ending flood that would have, over the course of generations, completely and utterly submerged the entire world that these people had ever known. This catastrophic and now scientifically proven sea level rise at the end of the last ice age is a perfect match for the universal human memory of a great flood. But there is a further and even more terrifying scientific theory that could explain the single, terrible day and night of destruction that Plato described. Around 12,800 years ago, at the very moment the Earth was warming and coming out of the Ice Age, the climate suddenly and inexplicably plunged back into a deep freeze, a 1,000-year-long cold snap known as the Younger Dryas. The leading, though still controversial, scientific explanation for this event is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This theory proposes that a large fragmented comet, or a swarm of asteroids, struck the North American ice sheet at this time. Such an impact would not leave a single, clean crater like the one that killed the dinosaurs, but its effects would have been just as catastrophic. It would have triggered continent-wide wildfires, evidenced by a black matte layer of soot that has been found in geological strata from this period all across North America. It would have thrown a vast cloud of dust and water vapor into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and triggering the sudden 1,000-year winter. And most importantly, the immense heat of the impact would have instantaneously flash melted a huge volume of the Laurentide ice sheet, triggering unimaginable continental-scale megafloods and a rapid, shocking, and globally catastrophic rise in sea levels. For any civilization living on the coastal plains of that era, this would have been the end of the world. It would have been a single, terrible day, an event of fire and flood and darkness that would have wiped their world from the map and their memory from history, leaving behind only the faintest, most distorted echo in the flood myths of the scattered, traumatized survivors. The search for the physical evidence of this hypothetical drowned world, this real Atlantis, is one of the most exciting and most challenging frontiers of modern exploration. We have mapped the surface of Mars and Venus with a higher resolution than we have mapped the floors of our own oceans. The ruins of a lost coastal civilization from 12,000 years ago could easily be hiding, buried under hundreds of feet of water and thousands of years of accumulated sediment. Strange, geometric, and seemingly artificial structures have already been found in the deep, from the massive terrace stones of the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan to the strange, grid-like patterns of the Bimini Road in the Caribbean, to the alleged sunken cities in the Gulf of Khambhat off the coast of India. While mainstream archaeology for now considers all of these to be unusual but entirely natural geological formations, they are a powerful and tantalizing reminder that there are vast, unexplored regions on our own planet that may yet hold the secrets of our own forgotten past. The ruins of our own predecessors may not be buried in the sands of Mars, but in the mud of our own oceans. The universal myths of a great world-ending flood, and the hard geological scars of a real planetary cataclysm at the end of the last ice age, leave us with a final, haunting, and deeply personal possibility that the lost civilization we have been searching for in the deep rock and the distant stars was not saurian, not microbial, and not alien. It was us. A forgotten earlier chapter of our own human story, a sophisticated, technologically advanced, global maritime civilization that was wiped almost completely from the face of the earth by a geological catastrophe, its memory surviving only in the faded, distorted, and increasingly mythological language of the stories our most ancient ancestors told around their campfires. We have journeyed through the entire 4.5 billion year history of our planet and out into the galaxy, searching for our predecessors. We have found the ghosts of the atom in 2 billion-year-old rock, the ghosts of industry in the poison mud of the deep sea, the ghosts of war in the vitrified ruins and glassy deserts, and now perhaps the ghost of our own forgotten history, drowned beneath the waves. We are now finally prepared to face the final reflection. What is the ultimate lesson of this grand and terrifying search? And what does the possibility of these many lost worlds, both alien and human, tell us about our own future, and our own impending encounter with the Great Filter? The Great Filter, the dark and chilling hypothesis that seeks to explain the silence of the universe, is not perhaps a single external wall waiting for us in our future. The evidence we have explored throughout this long journey suggests something far more intimate and far more terrifying. The Great Filter may be a mirror. It is the sum of all the catastrophic possibilities that a technological civilization, in its youthful and arrogant ascent, creates for itself. We see its reflection in every clue we have uncovered. It is the radioactive echo in the Antarctic ice, a warning of the filter of nuclear self-annihilation. It is the poisoned layers in the deep sea sediments, a warning of the filter of unsustainable industrial pollution and ecological collapse. It is the cyclical mass extinctions in the fossil record, a warning that the planet itself, as a Gaian superorganism, may have its own immune system, a filter designed to purge any species that becomes a threat to the whole. And it is the silence from the stars, a warning that countless civilizations on other worlds may have already faced these same filters and failed. The final and most profound horror is the realization that the filter is not something that happens to a civilization. It is something a civilization does to itself. The silence of the universe may be the silence of countless species who failed to overcome their own most destructive tendencies. This realization places our own modern global civilization in a position that is both terrifying and unique in the known history of the planet. We are, at this very moment, standing face to face with all of these potential filters. Simultaneously, we are altering our planet's climate at a rate unprecedented in the geological record. We are presiding over the 6th great mass extinction, wiping out other species at a terrifying pace. We possess arsenals of thermonuclear weapons, capable of reducing our entire civilization to a radioactive scar in the ice, and we are in the process of creating powerful, new, and potentially uncontrollable technologies, like artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, whose long-term consequences we cannot possibly foresee. We are, in short, running the gauntlet, but we have one single and perhaps decisive advantage over any and all of the potential lost civilizations that may have come before us. We are the first civilization on Earth that we know of to be consciously and scientifically aware that the gauntlet exists. The forgotten civilizations of the past, if they were real, may have stumbled into their doom blindly, unaware of the planetary boundaries they were crossing or the existential risks they were creating. We do not have that excuse. We have the unprecedented and perhaps terrible advantage of being able to read the warnings. We can see the echoes of past apocalypses in the rock, in the ice, and in our own myths. The search for these lost worlds, therefore, becomes the most important and most urgent task we can undertake. It is an act of profound humility, a recognition that we are not the beginning and the end of the story of intelligence on this planet. It is an act of collective wisdom, an attempt to learn from a past that is almost completely erased, and it is an act of existential urgency, a race against time to understand the filters that destroyed our predecessors, so that we might have a chance to navigate them ourselves. The central question of our video, what if the first Earth civilization was not us, is therefore not just a speculative historical curiosity. It is the most important question we can ask about our own future. The final and perhaps the greatest crazy fact is not any single anomaly we have discussed. It is the profound and undeniable pattern of all these clues taken together. The pattern of rise and fall, of civilization and catastrophe, that seems to be written into the very fabric of our planet, and perhaps the cosmos itself. The ghosts of these lost worlds, whether real or imagined, whether saurian or human, whether destroyed by their own hand or by a cruel twist of cosmic fate, leave us with a single clear and unavoidable choice. A choice that is being made by all of us every single day. The choice to be just another forgotten, cautionary echo in the deep time of our planet, or to become the first of its civilizations to learn from its past, to overcome its own self-destructive nature, and to finally and truly be remembered. The great filter is not in our stars, it is in us.